Something shifted in the off-grid world over the last several years, and most people missed it entirely. The desert communities that defined independent living for a generation are losing their appeal, not because of trend cycles, but because of water. Long-term self-sufficiency without a reliable fresh water source is a calculation that doesn't work, and the people who've run that calculation are quietly relocating north. The northern tier of the United States, a belt of lake-dense, timber-rich territory stretching from Maine to the Idaho panhandle, has become the new frontier for affordable, water-secure, independent living. Land prices here are a fraction of what you'd pay in the Sunbelt. Building regulations in some counties are virtually non-existent. Natural resources, freshwater lakes, state forests, harvestable timber function as infrastructure that never shows up on a utility bill. This video covers 12 specific lake towns where those conditions align, not general regions, specific places with specific land prices, specific regulatory realities, and specific reasons why they work for people who want to live on their own terms. Some of these towns are so far under the radar that real estate speculation hasn't touched them yet. A few have hospital access within town limits. Several offer tax mechanisms that cut annual ownership costs by nearly 40% for full-time residents. That window doesn't stay open indefinitely. Here are 12 hidden northern lake towns perfect for cheap off-grid living. Crystal Falls, Michigan. Iron County sits in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, a part of the state that most of the country treats as a geographic afterthought. That neglect has kept prices low and the landscape intact. Crystal Falls is the county seat. Population, roughly 1,400. The town itself is small, but the surrounding territory is defined by thousands of inland lakes and dense boreal forest. Private lakes, entire bodies of water with legal title, are still available for individual purchase here. That is not something you hear often. The land market reflects the region's invisibility. A 288-acre wooded parcel in Amasa, just north of Crystal Falls, recently listed for $438,000. 20-acre rural tracts in the county have listed for $52,000. River frontage on the Brule, 5+ acres, has appeared for under $120,000. These are not distressed properties. They're simply located in a place that mainstream speculation hasn't reached. The permitting environment is functional rather than punishing. Iron County operates through a decentralized construction office that handles building and electrical inspections. The primary regulatory steps for any new build are a land use permit before breaking ground and a soil erosion permit for any work within 500 feet of a water body, a rule designed to protect the watershed. Wells and septic systems fall under the Dickinson Iron Health Department. The process exists to protect the watershed, not to block independent builders. For anyone who wants large acreage, direct water access, and a regulatory environment that won't create friction at every step, Iron County belongs at the top of the list. And if $52,000 for 20 wooded acres sounds like a deal, wait until you see what's happening at the Minnesota border. Ally, Minnesota. Ely sits at the edge of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. More than 1 million acres of lakes, rivers, and forests that represent one of the highest concentrations of freshwater in the continental United States. The town transitioned out of a taconite mining economy into something harder to categorize. A community built around wilderness access and deliberate independence. Land values in St. Louis County average around $2,257 per acre. For Minnesota, that's low. The region's appeal isn't price alone, though. It's statutory clarity. Minnesota has adopted Appendix Q of the International Residential Code, a specific legal framework for tiny homes under 400 square feet. In St. Louis County, a tiny home built on a permanent foundation is a recognized legal residence, not a workaround, not a gray area, a defined, permitted structure with clear ceiling height and safety standards. For anyone who has navigated the regulatory ambiguity around alternative housing in other states, that clarity carries real weight. The climate is demanding. Hardiness zones 3A through 4A mean a growing season that can run as short as 10 weeks. Last frost as late as June 30th, first frost as early as September. Cold frames and indoor plant starts aren't optional here. They're infrastructure. Anyone planning serious food production has to factor in that compressed window before selecting the land. The counterintuitive part, cold, clear northern winters maximize photovoltaic output. Solar panels perform on reflected light and low ambient temperatures more efficiently than on summer heat. The same climate that limits the garden actively supports the energy system. State forest permits in St. Louis County allow residents to collect up to 12 cords of personal use firewood annually. Between solar output and legal timber access, plus, the energy picture in Ely is less constrained than the hardiness zone number. Grand Marais, Minnesota. Cook County has done something almost no county in the country has done deliberately. It formally designated areas where it will not provide municipal services. These are called no-service zones, officially mapped territories where the county has decided utility infrastructure will not go. For someone planning to live off-grid, a no-service zone is not a liability. It's a policy statement that off-grid infrastructure is the expected norm. Grand Marais is the administrative center of Cook County, sitting on Lake Superior's north shore. Population density across the broader county is 4.42 people per square mile. That number defines the experience here more than any individual listing. At that density, development pressure is effectively zero for the foreseeable future. Median land values sit around $2,321 per acre. The cost of specific parcels varies significantly based on proximity to Lake Superior, but the interior of the county remains accessible for buyers willing to trade direct lakefront access for privacy and acreage depth. What makes Grand Marais a credible retirement destination, rather than just a wilderness outpost, is the healthcare infrastructure. A local clinic operates in town. The broader Minnesota region provides access to the Mayo Clinic system for specialized care. That pairing of remote land and reliable medical access is genuinely rare. Most off-grid locations force a choice between the two. Cook County doesn't require that trade-off, which is why it draws a different kind of buyer than most places on this list. Island Pond, Vermont. Essex County is the most affordable county in Vermont, which is a state not known for being affordable. The Northeast Kingdom, the informal name for Vermont's northeastern corner, carries a specific character: half a century of back-to-the-land history, deep community infrastructure for self-sufficiency, and a regulatory framework that is demanding but transparent about what it demands. Island Pond is the hub. The off-grid culture here predates the term. Local supply networks, wood heating knowledge, and solar installation expertise have accumulated over generations of people who built their own homes and grew their own food long before it was a lifestyle category. Gervais Ace Hardware in town serves as a primary supply point for off-grid equipment, wood heating components, and the specialized parts that remote builds require. That kind of localized supply infrastructure matters when the nearest big box store is an hour away in a January storm. Vermont's regulatory process is the most rigorous on this list. Establishing a primary residence requires a wastewater system and potable water supply permit, which involves a soil percolation test and a septic system designed by a licensed professional. Well drilling requires a separate permit from the Department of Environmental Conservation. Gray water is allowed if collected and treated according to state rules. The pathway for incremental builders, though, is real and legally defined. Vermont permits what it calls primitive camps. Structures occupied fewer than 60 days per year to use composting toilets without the full septic engineering requirement, provided certain conditions are met. Someone who wants to establish a seasonal foothold before committing to a full primary residence has a legal structure for doing exactly that. The regulatory bar is high. The ladder has rungs. Cold winters in the Northeast Kingdom are offset by a solar advantage that surprises most people. Clear, cold days in Vermont produce strong photovoltaic output through the winter months, extending effective generation well past what cloudy coastal regions can manage. Houlton, Maine. Aroostook County covers nearly half of Maine's total landmass. It is the largest county east of the Mississippi River. Much of it has no local municipal government at all. The areas without municipal governance are called unorganized territories. They're managed by the Land Use Planning Commission, a state body that handles permitting and zoning in place of city-level inspectors. The result is a building environment more accessible to owner-builders than almost anywhere in the eastern United States. Alternative construction methods, cob walls, timber framing with locally harvested logs, unconventional structural approaches are not categorically blocked. Wastewater permits are still required because Maine's water quality standards apply statewide, but the structural latitude is substantial. Land prices reflect the region's scale. 40-acre parcels have listed for under $40,000. A 500-acre tract has appeared for $399,900, less than $800 per acre for half a section of Maine timberland. Median home values across the county sit around around $162,400, with an effective property tax rate near 1.04%. Property taxes in the unorganized territories run lower than in organized towns because there is no local municipal overhead to fund. No town government means no town budget to support. Houlton itself, as the county seat, provides essential services and supply access. Once outside the organized towns and into the unorganized territory, the expectation of self-reliance is structural, not aspirational. Roads, snow removal, and access are the property owner's responsibility. The people who work in that context tend to know exactly what they're getting into. Greenville, Maine. Piscataquis County is the most sparsely populated county in Maine. Greenville sits at the southern tip of Moosehead Lake, nearly 75,000 acres, the largest lake in New England, and serves as the gateway to the North Woods, a vast expanse of privately held forest and remote water extending north for hours in every direction. The land market here operates at a scale that doesn't exist in most of the country. Median list prices for land in the county hover around $140,000, but the median lot size attached to those listings is approximately 106 acres. 100+ acres of Maine forest is the baseline transaction, not an exceptional one. Many of those properties are accessed via private logging roads. The buyer becomes responsible for maintaining and plowing them. No municipal road service extends that far. That maintenance burden has kept speculative buyers away for decades and prices correspondingly low. It has also produced a local culture of mechanical self-reliance. Residents typically own tractors and heavy equipment because the land demands it, not because it's a hobby. Maine's primitive system for wastewater, gray water disposal fields using hand-carried water, is a viable option for small initial builds that don't generate significant waste volumes. Someone starting with a modest structure near Moosehead has a legal pathway to do so without the full engineering load of a permanent septic system. Build light first, expand as the property develops. C.A. Dean Memorial Hospital operates within Greenville itself, a genuine asset in a region this remote. For retirement age buyers, the combination of Moosehead frontage, 100-acre parcels, and in-town hospital access is a configuration that's genuinely hard to find anywhere else in the Northeast. Libby, Montana. The Kootenai River Valley in the northwestern corner of Montana falls in USDA Hardiness Zone 5B, measurably milder than the high-altitude plains that define most of the state. Fruit trees are viable here. Multi-season gardening is practical. For anyone planning to grow a meaningful portion of their own food, that climate distinction changes the math significantly. Montana's building code structure creates a specific opening for owner-builders. Residential buildings with fewer than 5 dwelling units are exempt from state building codes, provided they sit outside a city that enforces its own local ordinances. In Libby, that exemption applies. An owner-builder can construct their own home without state-level structural inspection. Electrical and plumbing work must still meet state standards. The systems inside the walls are regulated. The walls themselves are not. Land in the remote areas around Libby still produces parcels in the range of $349,000 for 20 acres with mountain views and lake access. That's higher than Midwest options on this list, but the construction exemption and the microclimate both offset part of that gap over time. The single most critical step before purchasing any land in Lincoln County is confirming water rights. Montana protects its groundwater through a permit system, and some basins in the state are closed entirely to new diversions. Not every parcel can legally support a new well. Spring-fed properties in the Kootenai Valley often sidestep the problem, but that due diligence has to happen before closing, not after. Priest Lake and Coolin, Idaho. Bonner County, Idaho has not enforced structural building codes since 1997. That's not an approximation or a technicality. The county made a policy decision nearly 3 decades ago and has held that position ever since. In practice, log cabins, earthbag structures, straw bale walls, unconventional foundations, none require structural inspection or county approval in Bonner County. Building location permits are required for structures over 400 square feet, ensuring setback requirements from property lines and lake shores are respected. Statewide permits for electrical, plumbing, and HVAC are still mandatory. The mechanical systems of a home are regulated for safety. The shell of the home is at the builder's discretion. Coolin is the small community on the shores of Priest Lake that sits at the center of this regulatory environment. It has become a reference point in owner-builder communities specifically because of the code. Exemption. The Panhandle Health District handles septic permitting. Tiny homes on wheels are classified as recreational vehicles panels and can be permitted on private land with a renewable permit. The cost of this freedom is reflected in land prices. Median price per acre in Bonner County reaches $39,294, the highest per acre figure on this list. The long-term calculation, land costs more upfront. Construction costs far less than conventional building would in any other market because there are no mandatory inspections, no required material standards for the structure itself, and no bureaucratic resistance to unconventional methods. For owner-builders who can do significant work themselves, the savings compound over the course of a build. Hayward and Winter, Wisconsin. Sawyer County is the core of Wisconsin's North Woods, thousands of lakes, the Chelan-Nicollet National Forest, and a regional culture built around outdoor self-reliance. The town of Winter sits within that landscape at a price point that keeps the surrounding area accessible to buyers who can't compete in the more visible Great Lakes markets. The firewood situation here is worth stating plainly. Residents can purchase permits to harvest dead and downed timber from the National Forest for $5 per cord, with a $20 minimum. Heating a home with wood in Sawyer County is a legal, inexpensive, and renewable practice. For off-grid residents whose energy costs are otherwise entirely self-funded, a legal firewood source from adjacent federal land is a line item that changes an annual budget. Wisconsin's property tax system assesses agricultural and forest land at lower rates to encourage conservation. Rural acreage in Sawyer County benefits. From that framework, median price per acre in the county sits around $9,417, competitive for the Great Lakes region, and well below what similar lake-adjacent land commands in Michigan's more publicized markets. What distinguishes this location is the hybrid model it enables. Truly remote, heavily wooded lakeside properties exist within 30 minutes of Hayward, where grocery stores, hardware suppliers, and medical services operate year-round. For retirement-age buyers who want genuine privacy without the logistical exposure of complete isolation, that proximity functions as a safety net. It's the difference between self-sufficient and stranded, and in a northern winter, that distinction is not abstract. Republic and Michigami, Michigan. The Marquette Highlands in Michigan's Upper Peninsula are defined by ancient rock outcroppings, significant elevation changes, waterfalls, and high-altitude lakes. Republic and Michigami sit at the center of this terrain. 58-acre parcels in the area have listed for approximately $60,000, raw land prices that would be unrecognizable in most other lake markets in the Great Lakes region. Michigan's principal residence exemption, the PRE, is the financial mechanism that makes this location particularly compelling for full-time residents. When an off-grid cabin is formally designated as a primary residence, the property tax millage rate drops from the non-PRE range of approximately 47 mils to the PRE range of approximately 29 mils. That reduction cuts the property tax bill by roughly 40%. On a fixed income or a retirement drawdown, that annual difference compounds in a way that genuinely affects long-term financial sustainability. The terrain offers an energy option that most off-grid locations don't make available. Elevation changes and running water across Marquette County create conditions for micro-hydro power, small-scale hydroelectric generation using the kinetic energy of stream flow. During the heavy snow winters of the Upper Peninsula, when solar generation drops significantly, a micro-hydro system continues generating power as long as water is moving. Properties with the right stream characteristics can maintain continuous power through conditions that would deplete a solar-only system. That energy diversification is built into the land itself. Combined with the PRE tax reduction, legal timber harvesting access, and land prices that remain low compared to more visible Michigan lake markets, the Marquette Highlands offer one of the lowest sustainable annual operating costs of any location in this video. Chelan, Washington. Pacific Northwest's reputation for persistent cloud cover is accurate across most of the region. Lake Chelan is the exception. Chelan sits in a high desert rain shadow on the eastern side of the Cascades. Rainfall is low, sunshine is consistent year-round. The solar potential here is higher than any other northern lake town on this list, and unlike the Midwest or Maine, it doesn't drop sharply in November. For an off-grid resident whose energy system depends on solar generation, the ability to generate power reliably through every month of the year changes challenges what's logistically possible. Lake Chelan itself is the third deepest lake in the country, fed continuously by the Stehekin River. Freshwater security is essentially answered before a buyer signs a deed. Land parcels in the area often start under $200,000, higher than Midwest options, but reflecting a combination of climate stability, water security, and recreational infrastructure that northern lake towns with cloudier skies can't match. Washington State's approach to rural housing outside the Seattle-King County corridor allows significant flexibility for alternative construction. North Cascades National Park sits adjacent to the region, and more than 80 trails support active outdoor recreation throughout the year. The trade is straightforward: higher per acre land costs than Michigan or Maine. In return, year-round solar generation, a deep cold water lake with an essentially permanent water supply, and a high desert microclimate sitting inside a notionally rainy state. For buyers whose energy plan depends heavily on solar, Chelan is the only northern lake market on this list where that plan works fully through every season. Spirit Lake, Iowa. Iowa's image as flat farmland is accurate for most of the state. The northwestern corner is different. The Iowa Great Lakes region, centered on Spirit Lake, sitting on the western shore of East Okoboji Lake, features 7 natural lakes and a rolling topography that reads more like Wisconsin than central Iowa. Median homeless prices in the Spirit Lake area run around $301,000, with rural tracts featuring lake views appearing around $375,000. Those prices are not the lowest on this list, but the off-grid cost structure here operates differently than in a remote wilderness county. Iowa's agricultural infrastructure, deep, statewide, and generations old, means the equipment and expertise for independent living are available and competitively priced throughout the region. Drilling a well near Spirit Lake involves less logistical friction and lower costs than it would in a remote Maine township or the Idaho. Panhandle. Sourcing large-scale solar components, establishing a septic system, or accessing heavy equipment for land preparation is faster and cheaper here because the surrounding region has supported that kind of work since before off-grid living had a name. Spirit Lake sits just south of the Minnesota border, which means it shares the fishing culture, the independence ethos, and the seasonal rhythm of the Northwoods. Without Minnesota's more structured regulatory environment, state-level regulations in Iowa are generally less complex for rural off-grid builds than those in Minnesota or Vermont. This is the practical entry point on the list, not the most remote location, not the cheapest land per acre, but the place where the friction of actually building and establishing an independent property is lowest. For buyers who want to prioritize execution speed and logistical ease over maximum acreage or minimum sticker price, Spirit Lake is the answer. The pattern across these 12 locations isn't about finding cheap land for its own sake. Cheap land exists in plenty of places that don't support independent living at all. What these northern lake towns share is a specific alignment: freshwater security from nearby lakes and rivers, timber resources that lower energy costs in measurable annual terms, population densities low enough to buffer against encroachment for decades, and regulatory environments that, whether through formal code exemptions or progressive statutory frameworks, don't treat owner builders as problems to be managed. The regulatory range on this list runs from Bonner County, Idaho, no structural building codes enforced for nearly 30 years, to Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, where permanent residence requires engineered septic plans and state water permits. Neither end of that spectrum is objectively better. They serve different builders with different skill sets and different timelines. The question isn't which county is most permissive, it's which regulatory reality matches what you're actually planning to build. The financial range is equally wide. Aroostook County, Maine offers some of the lowest price per acre for wooded territory anywhere in the eastern United States. Bonner County, Idaho offers near total structural freedom at significantly higher land cost. Michigan's Upper Peninsula delivers both low land prices and the PRE tax mechanism that cuts ongoing ownership costs for full-time residents by close to 40%. 3 questions narrow the field quickly. How much of the structure do you intend to build yourself, and how unconventionally? How much land do you need at what price per acre? How close does your situation require you to be to reliable medical care? Grand Marais, Minnesota, and Greenville, Maine answer that 3rd question with in-town hospital access alongside remote acreage. That combination is rare enough that it effectively creates its own category on this list: off-grid properties for buyers who need a healthcare safety net and aren't willing to sacrifice it for isolation. The freshwater is across the entire northern tier in abundance. In most of these counties, water security is not the constraint. What the research consistently shows is that the binding constraint is regulatory fit, finding the place where what you want to build matches what the county will actually permit without turning the process into an obstacle course. That match exists somewhere on this list. Land prices in the remaining hidden markets have not yet caught up to their actual value. That gap is the only variable here that runs in one direction.